This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey, everybody. Be prepared for a whirlwind, authentic, heartfelt geek out session that is going to help you hopefully get to the next level of you. I absolutely thoroughly loved my conversation with Ryane LeCesne. She is a master your mindset coach. She's a BIPOC woman advocate, and she is an imposter syndrome destroyer. And I just love that. And she has such a great way of talking about the biology in our nervous system and what happens with our self-talk and how we can become our own best friend. And there's so much research out now that has been out for years about how critical our self-talk and self-compassion and how we talk to ourselves is for our ability to lead, to achieve goals, to show up effectively. And she takes it to an entirely different level and talks about the effect on our nervous system and things that we need to do. And we go into some very tangible ways of identifying some of the most common killers of our confidence and what we can do instead. I think that on a personal and professional level, there is just so much richness in this. And I will say that everything Ryane talks about in the conversation we have, I literally see showing up every single day with the leaders and teams that we support. And so I know that there is something in this for everybody. Enjoy. Ryane, I am so geeky excited to have this conversation with you and geek out for like the next bit of time because I am obsessed with normalizing the messiness of being human. And this is like what you do. You dig into the messiness of being human and help give people understanding in language and go right there and move beyond it. And so let's geek out. Are you ready?
Let's geek out. I'm so excited, Rosie. Yes, I am. You said all the words: obsessed, messy, human. I love it.
So let's just start. So we think about the messiness of being human. One of the things that I always talk about is how we are hardwired. We are hardwired to seek out familiarity. We are hardwired to stay in our comfort zone. It's part of like protection as a species. And so talk about kind of what's happening in our nervous systems and why we need to pay attention to that as a starter, especially with everything that's going on in our world. Say more.
That's such a profound question. And I think such a great angle to come at is like, why is it so important basically to speak kindly to yourself and to be your own best friend? We're going to dive into that to talk about how to hold self-compassion for yourself, how to champion yourself and your ideas. Like, why is that so important? Why is that not fluff or just like a good idea or some other offhanded reason why we're having this conversation? This is truly life or death that we're talking about. And I want to say it like that because what we are talking about is how a person communicates to themselves. And what that does is, depending on the quality of our inner conversation, the quality of our inner talk, that determines essentially the quality of our inner experience. You are with you, I am with me, 365 days out of the year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We never separate from ourselves. And there is a being inside of us that hears and listens and responds to the voices inside of our heads. And the fact is that we actually can learn to control that voice in a way that's more empowering than disempowering. Because what winds up happening, and you're absolutely spot on with what the science says, is that we are hardwired to have fear. Fear is a part of our human dynamic. It's nothing that we can run away from. It helps us say, it's not a good idea to cross the street. I'm afraid I'll die. So there's like very good reasons why we would have fear. And yet fear as false evidence appearing real is far often what's running our lives, what's running our decisions, what's running our behavior. So if a person has a pattern of having a quality of inner self-talk that's, I don't know if I can do it. This is really hard. I failed before. I'm so terrified of failing. What if they find out? What will they say? Failure will be absolutely humiliating. If I'm not completely perfect, and if my idea is no mistakes, no typos, no one can ask me a single question where I can't answer it 100,000%, that type of toxicity, that is a type of quality of inner talk. What that winds up doing is it's actually traumatizing your nervous system because you are telling yourself these very toxic thoughts. And in doing that, the body can only respond in a traumatic way. It's one of four ways. You can either freeze, that's procrastination. You can fight, that's like beating yourself, shaming yourself. You can fawn, which is people please, or you can bond. That's four. That's all of them. That's the trauma response. So that's the only thing that we are able to do. And so I think that would be one of the biggest questions I would support your listening audience to think about is how do you talk to yourself? What is the quality of your inner self-talk? Does it sound more like what I just stated, that toxic thought, or is it like, I can do this. This is hard. No, I've done this before. Like, I can move through this. I have everything that I need. I do plan well. Look at my actions. Good job. That sounds maybe corny, but people do talk to themselves that way. And when they do that, they don't have trauma responses. They're not frozen in procrastination. They're not stuck in analysis. They're not hiding their light. They're able to authentically show up as themselves. So what we're talking about really is life or death because our dreams are on the line, our livelihoods are on the line, the decisions about how we treat ourselves with our health is on the line. So the way that you talk to yourself is absolutely critical.
I love everything you just said. And it reminds me of Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion. And she just has a new book out on fierce self-compassion and how it is such a critical skill. I know Brene Brown embeds it into the Dare to Lead curriculum that we teach as well, because it's so important that if we can't talk to ourselves like we talk to someone we love. And what I love about you do is you bring the physiology into it. It's not just because it gets in our way and we armor up and we get in our own way of making progress on goals that matter to us, but that trauma response is huge. And what I love about that, not that love a trauma response, but how you're connecting the dots is you look at all the research that's been done since COVID started back in 2020, and all of the things in this environment that keep happening in our world elicit trauma response after trauma response, like from the external environment. For disadvantaged groups that have had a history of being marginalized, right? Every new event that happens can bring up surface generations of trauma. You have COVID by itself that is a trauma-inducing, although chronic trauma. And we talk about trauma responses. And so what I love about what you're doing is there's so much external in our world right now that is already producing trauma responses to people, which is why trauma-informed care and trauma is becoming more to the forefront. And then what we don't realize is that we are exacerbating it by our self-talk. So it's like you're multiplying the level of trauma. And I think why this is so important is I do a ton of work. We work with workplaces all the time. And I just was with a group of leaders a couple of days ago, and we were talking about this. Like, if you don't recognize that this is happening within yourself and with your people, and you think this is not your role as a leader, like, no, you're not a therapist. That's not what we're trying to have you do. But if you can't recognize when you are triggered and having this horrible self-talk and armored in your own way, and your teams are showing up armored, how the heck are you going to move forward on these goals? And so I love how you are bringing this in, because I think there's so much happening. Our external environment might instinctively trigger a trauma response, but we can look at what we can control, which is that self-talk and what we're doing to ourselves that is maybe making that worse or better.
Exactly. And it's how to do that, right? It's like, what strategies, techniques, knowledge base does a person need to be able to improve over a lifetime and really improve their quality of talk over a lifetime? And essentially what that is reprogramming their nervous system, reprogramming their brain, reprogramming those neural pathways, reprogramming their beliefs. It is creating new beliefs about who you are, what your self-worth is, what your core values are, who you actually are as a person. And I'll say this too, this is coming to the forefront in my mind a lot as of recent. And it's this idea that these feelings that we're talking about, okay, so the thoughts that we have corresponding feelings, right? And this is something else that people, they do not have like a large vocabulary of emotional wherewithal, right? Like I'm feeling good, bad, happy, sad, irritated, annoyed. But when you really think about what is shame? What is that? What is grief? What's blame? What is the feeling of jealousy? What does that mean? What are those things? And what is the physical imprint that happens when you feel those things? Okay, so there's thoughts that we have. I am comparing myself to this person. I feel a sense of envy that I now actually have a chemical response in my body, and I'm feeling either I'm trying to cringe, or I'm like feeling restless, or I'm feeling irritated, or I'm feeling upset about something. And so, one, we're not really familiar with like how that works. If we can get in touch with that, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling jealous, and there's wisdom in that. That means I have a desire that I want, or there's something that I'm looking for, or I'm stuck in comparison. But that level of being able to talk to ourselves and be aware of what's going on within us is absolutely critical, because it's going under the radar. We can't technically see it, but it is our experience. I'm just really irritated right now. I don't understand why I'm so upset. And then what happens is the person internalizes that. I'm a bad person. I'm not enough. I can't do it. It becomes an identity. And that identity exacerbates the belief that's causing the comparison. So it's like this loop that's never ending until a person recognizes, and they learn by working with coaches. This is like a PSA. We're like, please get yourself a coach, get into therapy, get into a space where you can learn self-awareness, because that's the whole point.
Yeah. And I think that is so important, because I was just teaching a session earlier this morning, and we were going through Mark Brackett's work, and we were going through Brene Brown's Alice of the Heart work, and talking about how we need to expand our language vocabulary, and that when we don't have accurate language, we can't process stuff. We also can't ask for the help. Our language is a very limiting factor if we don't learn how to broaden that beyond mad, sad, glad, whatever. The other thing that I love that you said is that most of us were not raised to get curious about emotion and ask a bunch of questions and suck it up, get her done, move forward, less feeling, more do type of thing. And so it's recognizing, oh, I'm hooked, or, oh, I'm having an emotion. And Mark Brackett would say, rather than giving ourselves permission to feel and get curious about it, and what is it, and how did I get here, and what's the narrative I tell myself, it's like we just move forward, or we push it down, or we ignore it. And it's not benign. It's going to show up and metastasize elsewhere. So I think it's a process to be kinder and gentler to ourselves and become our own best friend. And before we get into some strategies of how to do that, let's go back to like some of the mindsets that we want to be mindful of. Because one of the things that I know is we're in the middle of a research study right now of looking at all of our coaching clients and even podcast episodes, and kind of looking at the commonalities of some of the mindsets. But what you've learned, particularly with high achievers, because I think so often we think about this self-limiting mindset of are people who we can make up a story that they're not very goal oriented, or they're not very successful, however we define that. But what I find is I work with a lot of really freaking successful people. I work with a lot of highly motivated, driven people, and they are beyond getting in their own way. So this self-limiting mindset shows up rampantly in people who from the outside world are successful, achievers, accomplished. It's not people who are sloths sitting in a corner. I don't really know. And so talk to me about, because you see these mindsets show up a lot with high achievers, and you talk about some of these confidence killers. So say more about that, because I think a lot of people listening are going to resonate with this.
Yeah, absolutely, Rosie. So these mindsets I see consistently, pervasively within my clientele, which are imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and distractionism. So I'll categorically talk about each of them independently. So imposter syndrome is this idea that no matter what a person's resume says, no matter what their experience is, no matter what their expertise might be, they have a constant, it is a deep, pervasive belief, a feeling, a sense that they're going to be caught not knowing something. They're going to be called out for not having the right information. And everybody's going to know that they're not as smart as everybody thinks that person is. Whether they are conscious of it or not, they're constantly dodging and ducking a spotlight, or apologizing for, oh yeah, my resume says all those amazing things, but if you only knew how hard I had to work, or if you only knew how messy my socks were, or if you only knew that my kid ate a bologna sandwich today, then you would really know that I am not good. Perfectionism is its very close twin. Most often, imposter syndrome incites perfectionism and back and forth. But the idea is if I'm perfect, then perhaps I could somehow be or belong. And that's when it shifts into perfectionism. And that is a perfectionist's overtone. And what I want to say, a lot of people think of perfectionism as somebody who needs something to be lined up or like the fridge in a particular order. That's actually not what perfectionism is. Perfectionism is, again, this deep, pervasive belief, unless you or whatever you're producing is 100% perfect, correct, it's completely thought out. Every single dot is dotted, every T is crossed, all answers can be answered, questions can be answered, there's no mistakes. If there's anything wrong with it, it's devalued, it's not enough, it's not perfect enough, it can't be expressed, explored. So this person is very trapped within themselves, feeling like if I were just perfect, if I could just get it perfect, but I never can. And so there's like this eroding of the self where it's like, I want to be perfect, but I can't be perfect. And here are all the ways that I'm not perfect. And because I'm not perfect, because this isn't perfect, I can't share myself. And until it is perfect, then I'm just going to hold. And so again, it teeters back into imposter syndrome because it's like, well, now I feel like an imposter because people are telling me I'm amazing. So they're very fluid and they are like Siamese twins, those two. And you can do lots of research about both of them. The third is distractionism, is a term I coined about 5 years ago in my practice because I work exclusively with high achievers, high achieving women. And what I consistently saw and see and experience myself is this feeling of, well, I guess I'm smart because I've done all these things, but I cannot figure out time. I feel completely scattered. I'm stalled. I guess I have goals. I don't even understand what goal setting is. What is so linear about that? Like, what does it even mean? How do you even set a goal? How do you think about the future? I feel like I can't even wrap my arms around today, let alone more than a to-do list. And it's very overwhelming, very scattered, very distracted, feeling like you are all over the place. And yet you can really focus on something very well and master that whole thing and then maybe even lose interest in it. And so it's a very complicated sense of distraction. What I've come to find out within the last year is that that distractionism for me was undiagnosed ADHD, so neurodivergence. And so what I more or less work with clients around when it comes to distractionism is the whole piece around goal setting and breaking all that down very tactically. But oftentimes what is so damaging to a person with distractionism isn't the fact that they don't have the skill right now of time management because they can learn that. It's the stories that they tell themselves and that they've been telling themselves all of their lives because this is a livelihood issue. They were children with this neurodivergence and probably children, if they're undiagnosed, and families had no idea this was happening. And so there's all the stories that happen. I failed this grade, or I was really smart, but I was the chatty kid, or all my report cards said that I was high potential, but I never really met my potential. And so I have all these stories I tell myself of I'm not smart, I'm not good enough, I can't really do it. And yet I've like gone through this conveyor belt of success. And so I'm like kind of here, but I really don't deserve to be here. So now I feel like I'm an imposter. And if I'm not perfect, so here how it's all looped. It's looped together. And quite frankly, I'm 43. And so I'm 43 and I'm a Black woman. And so statistically speaking, I fall well within a domain of people who will never be diagnosed with ADHD unless I was where I am in life, where I am in this work. I don't know if I would have ever really come across, oh, right, maybe this is the issue. So it's totally under the radar for so many people.
There's so much we could unpack and all that. But what I love, and as people are hopefully listening to this, so here's the thing, is go back to the messiness of being human. This is in our DNA and wiring. Like in those early years of our life, whether we had a functional, happy childhood or traumatic environment or everything in between, we make sense of our experiences by creating a narrative and creating story. And that narrative and story that we create basically lays down programming in our brain. It's like the operating system that guides us. And so a lot of what we're seeing today, when you talk about these narratives and these trauma responses in our nervous system, it's that programming. It's our 10-year-old self that is actually showing up and reacting today that's in the driver's seat. It's not our 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever year old self. And we don't realize that. And so now you take this person who's high achieving, high successful, highly driven, but now these people are showing up in workplaces. And many of them that you and I both work with have very high leadership positions and a lot of responsibility, or they're showing up in community with other people. And so when you put a bunch of us together where we don't know how to reconcile our own humanity, we don't know how to move beyond some of this stuff. And now we're supposed to be in relationship with other people. We're supposed to be collaborating and moving forward towards common goals. We start second guessing ourselves. Like you said, you talk about hiding your light. I talk about dimming my sparkle. We think if we're just perfect enough, then somehow we're going to avoid judgment, but you can't, because there's always going to be haters and judgment. And so it's a mess. And I think to pretend that that's not what's happening and at the root of so much of our divisiveness and disconnection and struggles, I think is doing a disservice. So rather than, okay, yep, we got this problem, what I would love to do is have you talk through what are some of the steps then that we can take to start to be more self-aware, to start to reframe, to start to become our own best friend, so that we can not only be more effective, but we can also have more effective teams, workplaces, and communities. Because if we have to heal ourselves to then collectively heal, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And it's exactly the focus of my business, is to do that healing and to not even be shy about calling it healing, and to actually have that be like a corporate word. You don't have to come to work to heal. And yet corporations recognize the humanity of each person. And so there are maybe avenues for healing. So healing. One of the things I've put together is an 8-step formula that is proven and scientifically based, that breaks down really how to shift and advance someone's mindset. And so I'm going to talk about the first 3 because they're foundational. So the first is clarity. And this comes in 2 parts. The first part is, what do you really want? And this is a question that I find people have a challenging time sitting with. It's almost like meditating. It can be very intimidating to claim what you want. What are your heart's desires? What do you really want to do? What is the thing that you might even, and probably most likely, have been shoving down for a long time that you don't feel like you're enough to accomplish? And that has oftentimes shame with it. And so that makes it uncomfortable to even go there. So the first part of clarity is, what do you want? Another thing that happens with that step is we want to jump to the how. How do I get it done? How do I get it done? And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about specifically what, only what at this point. As we think about the what, as I've indicated, there's this second part of clarity, which is fear, false evidence appearing real. That's all the things that we've been talking about. And we've got to be clear on both of those. What do you want? And what does fear say? Because if you aren't clear on what fear is saying, it's talking to you and you just are hypnotized by it. You don't even know, oh, wait, that's fear. Oh, I see you. I understand. I'm actually going to feel you. I'm going through my process. I'm going to feel you. I'm going to get curious, like Rosie said. I'm going to excavate the wisdom out of this, and I'm going to move in the direction of my goals because I understand who and what fear is as I process it because of this clarity. Then we move to courage, the courage to reframe self-limiting beliefs. And the idea here is that it takes courage to talk to fear in the way that we just talked about. It takes courage to look at yourself and say, you know what? You feel like failure could potentially be an option, but I'm going to talk to you in a way that is very loving, very compassionate. That's courageous. Those are courageous acts of compassion. And then we move to step number 3, which is confidence. And confidence is the ability to be able to prioritize your big, bold ideas, because we know that so often we are busy doing, but we're not doing the things that really will advance our goals and our dreams and our authentic selves, our brilliant selves forward. Those are the 3 steps that I talk about in every single coaching call with my clients at the top of the call during our intention setting, because that lays the foundation really for supporting someone navigate through those confidence killers.
I love that because I think so often you're right, we jump to the do. And recently I was working with a group and said, if you have to either for yourself or others, right? We have such an action bias where we go, okay, what are you wanting or what's important to you? Boom, how are you going to get there? And I don't know if this actually is Albert Einstein, right? But it's a quote that is well attributed to him. That's something like if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes getting really clear about it and 5 minutes in action. And I think we circumvent what are we wanting? We circumvent the what's important because it's uncomfortable or because, again, we don't want to go there or we don't know or we've never taken the time to think about it. And it's easier to just get in action than to sit and be. So one of the things that I learned years ago in one of my coaching trainings, they said, just keep sitting with it. And if someone can't even answer that, you can give yourself permission to just sit and marinate and let it unfold and trust that if you get the clarity of what you're wanting, the next steps will literally reveal themselves. And like, if you get clear for yourself, like wild horses almost couldn't drive you away because it's so evident. And maybe my next step is I'm going to go read this or I'm going to go have this conversation. We want to have courage and act, but we're not even clear about what we're trying to do. Or I even think about like on an organizational level, this is where I go back to like if an organization isn't truly clear about its purpose, it's not just words on a wall. If it's not clear about who we are collectively from a value standpoint, where we can actually practice our values and not just profess them. Like if we're not clear individually or collectively of who we are, what's important to us and where we're trying to go, if we're not aligned on goals, it all falls apart, but we just start doing stuff. And I think that's such a missed thing. So I love that. So walk me through. So, okay, let's say someone sits in the question of what is it I'm wanting, right? I identify my fear because I think that's huge. So it's okay. I'm going to name you so you don't have the power. I also use a false evidence appearing real. So I love that. What are some things people could do to start to take that and be more courageous? Because courage is acting not in the absence of fear, but so it's like, I have this, but it still feels way too scary for me to step into that arena. It still feels way too scary for me to take the next step because I have imposter syndrome, because I have perfectionism, because I'm distracted. What so many people could do to actually move into courage?
Absolutely. Okay. So, one, that self awareness piece is so very important for someone to really master that ability to get to exactly what Rosie just said, because then it leads to what could be an option, a next step, which is okay, now that I know that fear has presented in this way, I know what the kind of the train of thinking is, what's possible? What else is possible? What's potentially out there? What could happen? And almost literally like writing a list of, okay, well, this is possible or this is possible. I'll give you a very simple example that happened the other day that actually was really profound with my daughter. So she's 5 and she's going back to school after being sick for a couple of days. And she was having like the Monday blues and she was able to articulate, I'm afraid of going back. So we've step number 1 where she's clear on that. And so I said, okay, well, that there's a lot of wisdom in fear. And let's talk about what's possible today. What's possible if you didn't have fear? What's on the other side of that? And so I helped list all these things that were possible today. You could see your friends, you could color, you could play around. And within a matter of 6 or 7 things, she shifted internally and got up off of me and was like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go to the next thing. So that's a kindergarten way, literally, of saying, so you say to yourself, what's possible here? If I send this email and I already know the fears there, I could get a new client. That's pretty awesome. If I raise my hand for this promotion, I could put my name in the hat. If I reach out to this network, I could maybe become more a thought leader in that field of work. Just literally thinking about what's possible. That's a great way to prime your inner self, your inner talk. Another one that's helpful with what's possible is, what have I already done to debunk the fear? So that might be to write a list of, I've accomplished this, I can do this. This is on my resume. Read your resume aloud, read it in the mirror. Begin to hear yourself say those things and begin to feel like, oh my God, when I hear my resume read, I cringe. That is a good physical indicator that perfectionism or imposter syndrome are probably at play there. And so get very agile in saying it yourself and claiming it and owning it. Those are strategic and tactical ways to literally bolster your self-confidence.
I love that. And it's funny, it reminds me of with some of my clients, I give them a self-gratitude journal. Because if you look at joy, and especially as women, for those of you who are listening who don't identify as female, let's just say that there is a huge double standard where it's don't be too boastful, where men, oh, look at their accomplishments. The double standards are still very real. And I think that there's this underlying mindset from a culture standpoint, from just be modest and don't be too boastful, et cetera. And it's funny because I know I have a self-limiting belief of don't appear selfish or whatever, but there is a line. Like there are people that make me cringe, like they are me monsters. I don't care what gender they identify as. It's like seriously, there has to be a balance of you can be proud and share and be excited and be celebratory, and you can also be humble. There is a line for sure. But I think let ourselves feel that of, no, I can feel excited about this, or no, I can feel pride about this, or wow, like I've done that. That's really cool. And so self-gratitude is just like giving yourself an opportunity, right? To say, what went well for me today? What am I excited about? What qualities about myself am I appreciative of? Because we go right to what can I improve upon? I hear so many people that say, I can take in growth feedback or constructive feedback way better than I can take in praise, or they deflect it, or they don't believe it. And so I think that there's an art and a skill that is so important, because if we can't take in recognition, if we can't take in success, then I would say it's hard for us to even be connected to people, because that means that we can't take in joy, we can't take in love. There's just so many other things that it prevents us from being able to take in as well. So I love all of that.
Yeah. Can I give a little anecdote about that? That's another thing that I have found, and it's my eighth step that can be very foreign to people. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's this idea of celebration, like self-celebration. Essentially, gratitude for self is being able to celebrate. I'm excited. I'm celebrating this great thing that I did. And often for high achievers, we were raised to this is the status quo. Excellent is good, basically. Like you're striving for always excellence, and there might not be praise. Praise is modeled. If you were not modeled praising, and not more than just you're a good girl or a bad girl, but this idea of being able to say, I feel really proud about this thing. That sense of celebration can be very foreign to people.
Oh, yeah, because a lot of high achievers, it was just expected, so it's not celebrated, or it's what's next, or not only was it expected, but if you got anything less than that, it was you need to work harder. And so it's that perpetuates the imposter, the perfectionism. Oh my goodness, we are such messy creatures. So here's the thing. So speaking of self-limiting story, we know it's part of it. And one of the things, no matter how much work you've done on yourself, I've learned is that we all still have these self-limiting stories that pop up, no matter how enlightened we are, even if we coach this and teach this, like, again, it's part of being human. So Ryane, I would love if you would share, what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And when it shows up, how do you move beyond it so that you can still show up as a leader in your life?
Okay, so can I tell a story? So I just actually had a watershed moment in October. So fast forward, essentially, it was a Tuesday, day of my coaching with my coach. So meaning I, the client, I pay her handsomely to do her magic on my mindset. Help me do my own magic on my mindset through her process. So I'm preparing for my call. That evening, I have a presentation I'm getting ready to do that's a pretty high stakes marketing experience. It's very juicy. It's like the perfect audience. And I'm like trying to get this right. So I'm going into my coaching call with that being the focus of what we're going to talk about. Now, mentally, I'm going into my call and I'm very self-aware of this, right? I'm clear. I'm like, oh my God, I'm having this internal dialogue. I had a conversation with my husband who is very linear and goal-oriented, and he's talking about his goals and where he is in relationship to one of his goals. And I remember as I'm watching him, I was thinking like, wow, one, he's so linear. That's so interesting how I don't approach it that way. And number two, I'm trying not to judge. I'm trying to like do all the things, like the dancing of my self-awareness. And then I find myself in conversation for the morning around failure. Why would you even have goals if in between the time you set the goal and in between the time you accomplish the goal, you're failing because you don't know if you're going to make it? What if you in between don't make it? You have to be really hard on yourself in order to make the goal. So I'm hearing myself in this very deep, inquisitive conversation about failure. It's just everywhere. I can feel it. It's like literally on my soul. So I come into my coaching conversation and my coach asked me about my intention for the day. I want to spend 60 minutes on this presentation. I want to spend only 30 minutes on my mindset. Let's do that first. Great. So I go in about how I'm failing. I am failing. This is failing. Everything is failing. I told her about the story about my husband and my mindset and failing. And it's all failure. And she does what coaches do. And she says, let's dial back to this failure piece. First, how are you failing in something that you're creating? You're creating this. This is the genesis of you. Look at your success. And so she coached me through this self-limiting belief that I was very present with all my life. This was one of these core beliefs that was literally being expelled. And it became very evident to me that, oh my God, I had to sit. Tears came. It was like, I have lived my whole life with that voice as a dominant driver for everything. And it literally came out of me. And it was like I could hold it in my hand, this belief of failure. And I could look at it and say, honestly, it's like silence in my brain. I don't even know what to think anymore. As I look around my office, I can hear the old thought, like the water, this pretty water glass. I don't look at that and say, oh, this is so pretty. My sister-in-law got this for me. I say, you don't drink enough water. You're failing. I look at my Amazon pile that I haven't sent back and it doesn't say, oh, this is easy to do. It says, you're failing. You haven't done this yet. I look at every single thing up until that moment through a lens, through a paradigm, through a mindset of failure. You are failing. A week later, so that really freed up. It was like, oh my God, that night, that presentation, I got like 20 people on my calendar from that event. I'm like rocking. The next week, literally to a day, I make a decision that was like totally so benign, but I made a decision that I questioned after I made it. And I could hear, you are so bad. You're so bad. She was back. She had left for a week. And it was like the most tremendous week. I was showing up so differently for myself. I was like so kind. I'm an optimistic, loving person and I do this work. So I'm very aware, but this is a whole other level of like, this belief is actually gone. But there's like a more core belief, which was associated to you are bad. And so for that afternoon, literally through the evening, I took myself to Costco. I like drove the buggy around. I could hear like, you're bad, you're bad. And I wrestled that demon to the ground of this is not true. But I was able to do that even more because the other belief had been expelled. And so now I'm owning this. I'm standing in this. And so it was a real quantum leap in my internal development of my own inner self-talk and self-awareness. And so in the residual of that for the last 3 weeks has been astronomical. That doesn't mean everything has been gravy. It does mean I am very aware of, oh, wow, you really are nice to yourself. Like my body feels different. Quite frankly, I have suffered from scoliosis all my life. That one spot in my back is dialed to like a 0, which is very rare after coming out of a year where it's been pretty much on 10. So those are 2 core beliefs that have been recently expelled. Not that they're not there. I'm not bumping up against it at this moment, but those 2 were pervasive in there.
I love that because it's really a testament to we have to get aware of it and name it in order to be able to move beyond it. And it's not like oh, now I've named you go away. There's layers to it. And I always say it's navigating a dance. It's going to come back in. And so it's having practices of, okay, I'm now aware of you. So when you try to creep back in, what do I need to do that help me have that week of freedom, that help me have that week of rock in it? I love that for you.
Thank you. I love that for me too. I really do. It feels so much better.
Well, and we could go have a whole other thing about you. We all know that, like, again, you go back to our nervous system, and our spine is obviously the core of our nervous system besides our brain. And it's like, guess what? There is so much research that links when we're having back problems or whatever, it's a manifestation of other crap. And so you can go treat the physical all you want, and it's 9 times out of 10 not going to help if you're not fixing other stuff. So love all that. All right. Are you ready for quick questions?
Yes.
Okay. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is...
I would say living your brilliance, which is living your core values, living the dreams that are on your heart and feeling good in your skin doing it.
Love it. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
So initially I was like, go out there. And then I was like, wait, I think we got to get curious. What's going on? Another little quick anecdote. My daughter got really sick. I got to take off work. I can't show up. And so I could have said, I'm just going to grind it out. I'm going to show up. But no, what's going on with you? Are you not well? Do you have other priorities? Are you afraid? Why do you not want to show up? Because that's where I want to go. I want to go like, what's going on? And then most likely I want to get you out the door if it's aligned. Because oftentimes there's fear as to why we're not going out there. Maybe it's misaligned. Maybe it's not what you really want to do. Maybe you have the title of an attorney, but you really want to be a baker. So like, stop going out there. Stop going to court. Go to the baking home.
I love it. You got to get curious first. Love it. All right. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
Probably how much self-doubt, at least up until now, used to go on. It was crippling. That's, I think, why I can oftentimes give words to it. It was really there. It's a real experience.
And I so appreciate you sharing all that, because I think so often we create stories about people that we know or don't know. And we think, oh, this person does this for a living, or has this platform, or has this knowledge, or has this framework, or whatever. And so they must have it all figured out. And it's like, no, newsflash, we're human. Love it. All right. What's your favorite go-to movie?
Pretty in Pink comes up as a pretty good one.
Oh my God, I love that. Ducky, Blaine. Anyway, okay, it's a good one. What's your go-to song?
Okay, so right now it's anything by Megan Thee Stallion. I'm on this whole ratchet female rap kick, and it's funny because I just got into it this summer. I'm like so late, but anything Megan Thee Stallion.
Love it. All right, what's something you can't live without?
Coffee and my family.
How do you take your coffee?
Latte.
Latte, all right.
With milk. I'm still a dairy person. I haven't kicked it.
Well, you know what? Dairy is not everyone's foe. So there we go. All right. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Oh, that's fun. My daughter really does make my heart happy. It's pretty special to like go in and wake her up, and it's just really a light. That's a very special spot in my life.
Love that. And what are you grateful for right now?
Right now, honestly, with this shift that I've shared with you, I'm grateful for my business. Up until this point, my business has been something I've loved, but I've been more afraid of. So there's been a real fear relationship with it, which means it's been a hard row to hoe. Not that I haven't been successful, like behind the mask, what I've been feeling about myself, feeling about the business. And with this disassociation from the belief that I'm failing all the time and that I'm a bad person, really, I'm of service. And that has been a joy that was not there before. And that feels, again, I said at the beginning, life-saving, because I've been successful and in paralysis at the same time.
And you know what? You're not alone. There's so many people like that. So I love that. I love that for you. That's fantastic. All right. Closing question. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
To improve your self-talk.
100%. Bam. Mic drop. Awesome. Ryane, it has been such a joy geeking out with you, and thank you for all that you shared. And I know I'm taking away some awesome nuggets, and just thank you for being such a bright light and helping us move beyond that false evidence appearing real.
Thank you, Rosie. This was awesome.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.